If you're trying to learn English and you're tired of boring textbooks, you're going to love this. Stories like this help you learn naturally, without even noticing. You'll pick up useful grammar, expressions, and vocabulary while getting completely lost in the story. That's the magic of storytelling for language learners. So, before we begin, do one thing. Subscribe to the channel right now, hit the like button if you love learning through stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss our daily videos. A soft breeze passed between the narrow buildings of Tokyo as a young traveler stepped out of his tiny guest house. He had no clear plan for the day, no appointments to keep, no one waiting for him. He just wanted to walk, to see what the city would show him. His shoes tapped quietly on the sidewalk, the only sound besides the rustling leaves and distant train rumbles. The sky was a soft gray, not dark enough to suggest rain, but bright enough to keep everything glowing with a cool light. It was early in the morning. Streets were still sleepy, though cafes had begun to open, releasing the rich smell of brewed coffee and toasted bread into the air. He took a deep breath and smiled. He walked past narrow alleys filled with tiny restaurants. Some of them had Norin curtains hanging from the doorframes, moving gently with the breeze. Through one doorway, he could see a chef preparing rice in a wooden tub, every move quiet and precise. There was something calming about the rhythm of it all, the careful motions, the silence, the respect in the way things were handled. He didn't enter any of those places. He kept walking, letting his steps lead him rather than any destination. A side street pulled him toward it, decorated with rows of vending machines. Each machine glowed in a different color, some blue, some red, some white. They sold not just drinks, but soup, batteries, neckties, and even fresh flowers. The boy chuckled softly, surprised by the creativity packed into such small boxes. A sudden splash of color caught his eye. Turning a corner, he found himself facing a giant mural painted on the side of a 5-story building. The artwork showed a giant koi fish flying through clouds like a dragon, surrounded by sakura petals floating in the wind. A small plaque at the bottom explained the artist's vision, harmony between movement and stillness. The boy stood there for a few minutes, eyes wide. He had never seen anything like it. Continuing his walk, he reached a quiet neighborhood where modern buildings stood next to old wooden houses. He admired how these two worlds lived together, past and present, history and technology, without conflict. A cat crossed the street in front of him, slow and confident, then disappeared under a fence. He took a turn and entered a park without even noticing it was a park at first. It didn't have large signs or tourist crowds. It was simple. There were stone paths, small ponds with koi fish, wooden benches, and maple trees with leaves already changing color. An elderly man sat on a bench feeding sparrows with tiny seeds from his palm. The birds landed gently on his fingers, trusting and calm. For a moment, the boy didn't move. He just stood there, watching, breathing. The noise of the city had vanished. All he could hear was the soft rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the occasional splash from the pond. Time seemed to slow down, and his heart beat in a peaceful rhythm. Then something odd happened. As he was about to leave the park, he noticed a small wooden sign with an arrow pointing downward. It said, "Path to Nowhere." The arrow pointed to a narrow set of stone steps hidden behind bushes. Most people would have ignored it, thinking it was a joke. But the boy didn't. He felt curious. Without thinking, he stepped down the path, letting the stones guide his feet. The steps were damp from the morning dew. Green moss grew between the cracks, and tall bamboo blocked most of the sunlight. As he walked, he felt the air grow cooler. The sound of the city faded again. After just a minute or two, the path ended at a tiny wooden gate. It looked ancient. There was no lock, no sign, just a gentle push needed to open it. He stepped through. Behind the gate was an empty courtyard, completely silent. A small Shinto shrine stood in the center, surrounded by stone lanterns and raked gravel. Nobody was there, no tourists, no priests, no sound. He could hear his own breath, the rustle of his jacket, the soft crunch of gravel under his shoes. He didn't know how he had ended up in this place, but it felt like a secret gift from the city, a place shown only to those who wandered without plans. He sat down on a bench near the shrine. He didn't take photos. He didn't pull out his phone. He just closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the stillness. After a while, he stood up again. His journey wasn't over yet. He still had the whole city to explore. And Tokyo, it seemed, had many more secrets waiting for those who walked without rushing. The boy stepped back through the wooden gate, quietly returning to the stone path. Behind him, the hidden shrine remained silent, as if it had never been there. He climbed the steps slowly, the bamboo on either side whispering in the wind. Once he reached the top, the city returned, louder, faster, but still gentle in its own way. He didn't check a map. He didn't search for landmarks. He simply followed his feet again, trusting the city to guide him. Soon he found himself in a district filled with shops that seemed too tiny to exist, stacked one above another in thin buildings, squeezed into corners, yet full of life. A woman sold handmade paper goods in one corner shop. Another place displayed miniature bonsai trees shaped into clouds and waves. He paused in front of a bookstore. The display window was filled with second-hand novels, old magazines, and hand-drawn posters. Inside, soft yellow lights glowed behind foggy glass. The door creaked as he opened it, and a tiny bell jingled. The air inside was warm and smelled like pages and wood. He walked between the shelves slowly, reading titles he couldn't understand. Most of the books were in Japanese, their spines worn but cared for. On one table near the back, he found a notebook filled with sketches. Someone had drawn faces, buildings, birds, umbrellas. Each image was full of emotion. He didn't know who had drawn them or why the book was on sale. But he gently placed it back, smiling. As he stepped out of the shop, a group of students passed by, all wearing matching uniforms. They chatted, laughed, and disappeared into a narrow alley. The boy watched them go. He couldn't understand their words, but their energy made him feel lighter. He kept walking. Soon, he arrived at a street market. It was colorful, chaotic, and filled with smells. Grilled fish. Roasted sweet potatoes. Fried noodles. The scent wrapped around him and made his stomach growl. He hadn't realized he was hungry until now. One vendor smiled and handed him a small paper cup filled with warm, sweet tea. The boy nodded in thanks, sipping slowly. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't care. It was warm, and that was enough. He found a corner and stood quietly, sipping his tea and watching the crowd. Tourists pointed at strange fruits. Children begged their parents for candy shaped like cartoon characters. Elderly shoppers moved with calm focus, comparing prices and chatting with stall owners. A little further down the street, he discovered something unexpected, a tiny art gallery tucked between a ramen shop and a nail salon. There was no ticket booth, no security guard. Just a sliding glass door and a welcome sign painted by hand. He entered quietly. Inside, soft music played from a speaker hidden behind a curtain. The walls displayed modern ink art, bold lines, minimalist shapes, dreamlike themes. One painting showed a single crane flying over Tokyo Tower, its wings stretching beyond the frame. Another was a blend of blue and gray, like ocean mist moving through tall buildings. A small note beneath the painting read, "What if the sky were underwater?" He stood still for a long time, letting his eyes rest on each piece. There were no crowds here, no guides explaining what to think. Just space, silence, and imagination. The gallery owner, an elderly man in a wool cardigan, sat in the corner drawing something with a fountain pen. He didn't speak. He didn't look up. He just worked, calm and focused. After leaving the gallery, the boy wandered again, this time toward a quieter part of the city. Tall apartment blocks rose above him like trees. The streets were clean but nearly empty. He turned a corner and came upon a narrow canal, its surface smooth like glass. Along the edges, cherry trees leaned over, their branches brushing the water. It wasn't the season for blossoms, but a few late petals still clung to the branches, pale pink against the gray sky. He walked beside the canal for a long time. Bicycles passed him now and then. A woman walking her dog smiled politely as she passed. A jogger ran by with headphones in. No one stopped him. No one stared. But they didn't ignore him either. He felt like part of the scene, like a thread in a larger fabric. At one point, he stopped at a small bridge. The water beneath it reflected the buildings above, slightly distorted. He leaned on the railing and stared down, watching a koi fish swim slowly through the reflection of a neon sign. A train rumbled in the distance, not too loud, not too close. He moved on. Eventually, the buildings grew taller, and the sidewalks busier. He found himself near Shibuya, the famous crossing, the bright lights, the giant screens flashing ads and music videos. Crowds waited at the corners for the signal to change. Then, all at once, they moved, a wave of motion, people walking in every direction, perfectly choreographed. The boy stood at the edge and watched them go. He didn't cross. He wasn't ready to be part of that movement yet. Instead, he turned away from the lights and headed into a quieter back street. There, between a laundromat and a barber shop, he found a tiny park, barely more than a bench and a tree. But it was enough. He sat for a while. A vending machine beside the bench blinked softly. The sun had begun to set, casting a golden light on the buildings. The boy looked up. Above him, high in the sky, a single airplane moved slowly, almost invisible in the fading blue. He took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what he had seen that day. Nothing loud. Nothing famous. But every corner, every hidden moment, felt like a discovery. Tokyo hadn't shouted for his attention, it had whispered, and he had listened. The evening light in Tokyo had a softness to it, as if the city was wrapping itself in a gentle blanket before night arrived. The boy stood up from the bench, stretched his legs, and walked slowly toward wherever the path might lead next. He didn't have a destination, but Tokyo kept offering him places to rest, places to pause, places to breathe. Soon, he reached a quieter district with residential buildings, narrow homes with sliding doors, small balconies, and plants arranged carefully at the entrances. The air smelled like steamed rice and laundry detergent. He passed an old man watering his bonsai collection on the sidewalk. They nodded at each other, and that was enough. As the sky darkened, paper lanterns began to glow outside shops and eateries. The light wasn't bright, it was golden and flickering, like a memory. He followed a soft melody drifting through an open door and found himself in front of a traditional tea house. Inside, two musicians were playing the shamisen, their fingers moving swiftly on the strings. He didn't go in. He just stood outside, leaning against the wooden frame, letting the music reach him. It echoed something old, something deep, like the heartbeat of the city beneath the concrete. After a while, he continued on, refreshed. In another alley, he stumbled upon a wall covered in painted murals. They weren't graffiti, they were scenes of Tokyo, past and present, drawn by artists who loved this city. One panel showed Mount Fuji rising behind a skyline of modern skyscrapers. Another showed a girl in a kimono offering a dove to the sky. As he walked along the mural, a cat darted out from a trash bin and ran across his path. It stopped, looked back at him with curious eyes, and then disappeared into the shadows. The boy laughed softly to himself and followed in the same direction. The streets narrowed again, and he entered a neighborhood of izakayas, small Japanese pubs. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the sizzle of grilled food spilled from every open door. People gathered around steaming plates, sharing food and stories. Smoke from yakitori grills drifted into the air, mixing with the scent of sake. He walked past one open kitchen and paused. The chef, wearing a white bandana, was flipping skewers with precise movements. A little bell rang as a new customer entered. Inside, people sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces flushed from warmth and drink. He kept walking, not wanting to disturb the harmony of the place. Further down the street, a narrow stairway led up to a rooftop garden. There was no sign, but a soft glow peeked through the plants above. He climbed slowly, unsure of what he would find. At the top, He found a small rooftop cafe with hanging lanterns, vines along the railings, and mismatched chairs. A few people sat quietly, sipping tea and watching the skyline. He ordered a cup of green tea without speaking, just pointed at the menu, bowed slightly, and received a smile in return. He took a seat near the edge. From there, the city stretched out before him. Neon lights began to sparkle. Trains moved along tracks in the distance. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and faded. The tea was slightly bitter, but warm. He wrapped his hands around the cup and exhaled slowly. A plane blinked its red light far above the city, and he wondered where it was going. Or maybe where it had come from. Then he realized, it didn't matter. He was here now. And here was enough. When he finished his tea, he descended quietly and found himself back on the street. The pace of the city had shifted. Night had brought a different rhythm, slower, heavier, more thoughtful. Even the traffic lights seemed to blink more gently. He passed a group of teenagers dancing in front of a speaker, practicing moves in sync. Their sneakers squeaked on the pavement, their movements confident and joyful. He watched for a while, then turned away, not wanting to interrupt their flow. Eventually, he reached the edge of a small temple nestled between apartment buildings. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. The gates were open, the lanterns lit. He entered without a word, stepping onto the smooth stones. A single bell hung in the center, above a bowl of coins. He dropped a coin in gently. The soft clink echoed through the air. Then he stood still. He didn't pray. He didn't ask for anything. He just breathed. In the silence, a breeze moved through the trees. A few leaves danced across the ground. Somewhere behind him, wind chimes rang softly. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the sky was darker. Stars tried to peek through the city's glow. He left the temple with quiet steps and wandered into a side street lined with vending machines, some old, some new. He pressed a button on one without thinking and received a can of hot cocoa. He cracked it open. The warmth seeped through his fingers, into his chest. He sat on a nearby step and took a sip. He realized something in that moment. He hadn't seen anything grand that day. No Tokyo Tower up close. No sumo matches. No giant shopping malls. But he had seen everything. He had seen the soul of the city, in the alleyways, the rooftops, the small smiles of strangers, the rhythm of ordinary life. It wasn't about the surprises or the headlines. It was about presence. It was about noticing. About feeling connected without speaking a word. He had walked through a living story, one only visible to those who looked without rushing. The last sip of cocoa was sweeter than the first. He stood up and walked toward the train station. It didn't matter where the next train would take him. The journey wasn't about the destination. It never had been. He stepped onto the platform and waited. A soft wind passed through the tunnels. The city kept breathing. If this story helped you learn something new in English, or even just feel something, leave a comment below and let me know which part stayed with you most. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calm stories that help you practice English naturally.